Hello and welcome back to Walk the Cinema podcast.
And it's officially spooky season. So during the month of October, we're going to be covering horror movies, obviously, and we're kind of going to go through the history of horror. Not really the history of horror, but just 4 movies in release order that were like important to the genre.
Yeah, we're going to be covering different horror movies from different decades and, kind of seeing the progression of what makes people frightened, I guess.
Yeah, so if you like horror movies, subscribe or follow or whatever the platform you're listening to calls it. And we're going to get on the episode.
So today's episode is Nosferatu.
Yes, I say Nosferatu.
I say Nosferatu, but, it's for the reason that I say it like that, it's because how SpongeBob said it.
Yeah, you're already going into the significance of this because even SpongeBob mentions Nosferatu.
Yeah, which, that was like that's the only reason why I know, to be honest, what Nosferatu was at such a young age.
Well, I think this is the biggest silent horror film.
Mm-hmm.
There's other big ones. You got the Phantom of the Opera and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, but I think Nosferatu is the most significant one. It's, let's say for their sake, a loose adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they can't say they adapted it.
I mean, yeah, I think that from my understanding, the studio that produced it, it was unofficial and unauthorized, but I don't think that they actually kept it a secret that it drew inspiration from Dracula.
They just changed the names. They didn't really change the story.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna just be honest, I don't like Bram Stoker's Dracula. The story of Dracula in general has no interest in me. So, I mean, I've seen them all, pretty much. I've seen this, I've seen the Big Bela Lugosi Universal Dracula, the Spanish version. I've seen Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. It just doesn't click for me.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of Dracula in general?
I think Dracula in and of itself is... It's hard to say because I do think that it's one of those movies or concepts that have kind of been overdone in and of itself. And I feel like there are vampire movies that I like, but I don't know if it's, if you can consider all vampire movies at the root of their, at their core are inspired by Dracula.
Well, I'm talking about straight adaptations of Bram Stoker's book. Or loose adaptations in this case, unofficial.
I've never actually read the book. Surprisingly, I did want to for a while, but I just never got around to it. But the story sounds interesting, and the story of the real life inspiration.
Vlad III, is that who it was?
Yeah, I think so. It was something like that. They did have, an inspiration of a real life person. I think that's like super interesting, but the actual story in and of itself, I don't know. I don't know if I don't like it because it is so played up, or I don't know if I don't like it because it's just not my cup of tea. I don't really know.
Well, I don't know. I don't dislike any of the ones I've mentioned. The story in itself is never going to captivate me much.
Mm-hmm.
But Nosferatu is probably my favorite adaptation of the book that I've seen. It's probably I know there's a Turkey version out there that people say it's very close to the book. But this one is the one we picked because it's so important.
Yeah.
Even Nosferatu, even now, is still being used as a different figure from Dracula. It kind of became a different vampire.
Yeah.
Because it's not human looking, which is an issue, kind of, because historically this might be a caricature of Jewish people in Germany. An anti-Semite character, but we don't associate it with that now.
That's interesting to think about, though, because I hadn't really thought about the implications of what was going on at the time, and like that could be
Yeah, Germany at the time,
adaptation.
this was before World War II,
Yeah.
but they still had scapegoats in their Jewish population,
Yeah.
and Nosferatu looks like a drawing of a caricature of Jewish people of the time, with the big nose and the ears and claws, which is not great, but his look goes beyond that, because even now, I mean, you mentioned SpongeBob,
Mm-hmm.
and they have their version of Nosferatu, and What We Do in the Shadows has their own version of Nosferatu.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
now use this look of Count Orlok as a whole different vampire that doesn't look human.
Yeah, and it's definitely like I would consider it like its own thing, to be honest, separate from Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they probably weren't really like intending that when they produced the movie and like released it and all that. I think that they wanted people to come see it because it was Dracula, but I think that so being so far removed, like we're at almost 100 years past when this movie came
Yeah,
out.
1 year short of it.
Yeah, so like I do think that it has become its own thing, because before I knew anything about Nosferatu, and I just knew about the character, I thought it was completely different from Dracula. Like I thought it had nothing to do with
Mm-hmm.
Dracula.
Obviously, the story goes through the same elements, but they all have slight differences, which is normal in book adaptations, and it's what makes them different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
But this one has some funny ones to me, like when they mention a werewolf, which in the Lugosi version is a wolf, or big animal. They have a hyena, which looks
Yeah.
really weird.
I wonder if it was like what they had available at the time, or like
Probably, but it was supposed to represent a werewolf or a
yeah.
wolf, just something menacing. But it was a tiny little hyena
Hmm.
that it was a striped hyena or something like that. It looked kind of dirty.
Yeah, I was like, oh, look at that. But I feel like the quality of movie that we watched
Mm-hmm.
it on YouTube.
Yeah, because this is not owned by anyone anymore. You can use it as you'd like.
Yeah, the the crystal clear image on some of the shots kind of freaks me out, because I don't know, it looks like a modern day person
Talk
in
about hotter.
yeah, yeah. He looks like a modern day person in a
Because Count
film.
Orlok doesn't look like a modern day person.
No, but he just looks like a person I would see in a movie today.
Yeah.
Just with filters on it that like make it look like
We
he's
also
an
watched it
old-timey.
in black and white, which is not the ideal way of watching it. There's so many different ways of watching Nosferatu, because this was lost for a while. Well, it wasn't lost. It was specifically eliminated by Bram Stoker's family.
Mm-hmm. His heirs.
Yeah, they didn't want this movie around because, they didn't get license for the story. But yeah, we watched it in black and white, which is not the way you're intended to watch it. I'm pretty sure a lot of the scenes were supposed to be tinted blue to look like it's nighttime.
Oh, that would make sense.
And that's why some of the scenes look so bright
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. A lot of these silent films that we watch nowadays, we don't watch them with the colors they were intended to be seen. Because theaters back then weren't showing them in black and white. They showed them with different tints. It would be yellow, orange, red,
They'd have
green,
the filter,
blue.
that
Yeah.
filter paper over it.
It would show some part that they wanted to. So blue would mean night. For example, in the boat scenes, they're very, very bright in the black and white version. They're supposed to be a little darker and look like it's nighttime, because he's not a fan of the sun, because he's a vampire. That's the vampires we know now. They can't be in the sun.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to watch this. The score is also
differs, yeah.
People pick the variation they're going to watch depending on the score. People have preferred music over this film. I actually don't care. I've seen it with different scores. It doesn't matter much to me.
I think this movie is it's pretty iconic, I'd say, in its look, especially Count Orlok. And I mean, they have a ton of different scenes that you can point out that you kind of just know what that movie is, like what this movie is.
Yeah.
My one that I'm going to point out is because of SpongeBob. I used to watch SpongeBob all the time. I had the first 2 seasons on VHS. And one of those episodes was the hash slinging slasher that Squidward made up to scare SpongeBob when they were working at the Krusty Krab at night. And at the very end, they find out it was, just a person that wanted to apply to work there, but they couldn't figure out who was flickering the lights. And then they pan over and it's just a still image of Nosferatu standing in the doorway when he comes to try to, I guess, kill Hutter. But it's that, just a screen grab of that, and he's like, they've got it like animated flickering on and off the lights, and that's my first ever.
The movie's really well composed on screen for the Count Orlok character. The way he fits through doors.
Yeah.
He's like really slender and tall. He has a very unique look, which is, I think, mostly why he transformed to something different than Dracula.
Yeah, because you can pinpoint, like, that's Count Orlok,
Yeah, this was directed by F.W. Murnau. I don't know how to say his last name. I've seen multiple films of his. He's one of the biggest figures in German cinema in the 20s. I'll be honest, I think he's a little overrated. I never loved any of his movies, but this is his biggest one, and it shows his talent. The way he plays with light and the shadows of Count Orlok really... I mean, in the 20s, you'd probably be really scared of this.
Yeah, especially the scene where it's just you see his shadow coming up the stairs to the bedroom, or to, like, the tower.
This is the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, towards the end.
And you see, like, his long, spindly fingers.
Yeah, the, like, claws.
Yeah. That would genuinely scare me if I
mean,
saw
even
this.
now, it's kind of scary if you're watching it, like, I don't know, late at night, or you're young.
Yeah, it's still pretty spooky.
You leave an impression on you, for sure. I mean, visually, the movie's great. But again, as I said, I don't care for the Dracula story.
Yeah, I think it did slightly, I guess, deviate from the Dracula story, because Count Orlok never actually makes any new vampires. He just kills people. Yeah. And, I think it had something to do with the idea that the Black Plague was kind of the scapegoat for everyone dying.
Yeah. Because he uses the rats that come on the boat trip, so that's like how the Black Plague started. It was the rats on the boats.
Yeah. That
transported it. So they used that. They used the dirt, because I guess in the universe the vampires were created during Black Plague, and they were buried.
Yeah, I guess.
So they used the dirt that they were buried in.
Well, I think that the dirt came in was more along the lines of, like, that's where he draws his powers from.
Yeah, he draws his powers from the dirt where the first vampires were buried in.
Yeah, I guess so.
I think that's what...
Yeah, this, I see parallels of this movie with other kind of classic horror movies, I guess. Not in the sense that they're all exactly the same, but they kind of have similar themes, where it's like you have our main protagonist character, in our case Hutter, and Dracula sees his wife and is like, I want her. So he tries to get rid of Hutter, kind of.
Yeah.
And take his wife, basically, Yeah,
but that's Dracula.
Yeah, that's Dracula, but, like, I also think that you can kind of see similar concepts in Frankenstein, at least the Universal adaptation of it. Yeah. And also, Young Frankenstein does it too.
Young Frankenstein does it even further, where he actually takes the wife.
Yeah. So there's that, and then I don't know, I feel like there are other movies that revolve around, like, classic horror that all involve like a young woman that either has to be the one that like is the object of the quote unquote monster's affections, or has to be the one that stops it from happening, like stops like the killing or the curse from happening, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing with the Mummy, now that I'm thinking about it. Where he
Yeah, it's the same thing with you're talking about the Boris Karloff Mummy?
Yeah. They're all kind of similar now that I think about it.
They all want someone else's girl.
Yeah. Which is, it's fine. I guess it's a trope, and it's very much it's like a trope that you would find nowadays, which I can't really think of anything off the top of my head now that's kind of in everything, but I assume at the time that's just kind of what the audiences wanted to see. So,
if it works, it works.
Yeah. It's just kind of interesting to point out, I guess.
Yeah. There's this movie that we haven't watched. It's called Shadow of the Vampire, and it's fictionalized version of the production of Nosferatu, where the guy that plays Nosferatu, Max Shriek, is an actual vampire. So I don't know if that was a myth in the 1920s or something, where people thought he was an actual vampire because of the way he looked.
Maybe. That's interesting. That would be an interesting thing to research. I don't know how successful you'd be at finding an answer to that, but that is pretty interesting. I mean, there's people nowadays that there are rumors about how they conduct themselves based on their movies and whatnot.
There's rumors about everything. I remember when Lady Gaga became popular, there was rumors about her that were like really... People really believed them.
Yeah.
And this is the
Same
2010s.
Yeah. Same with like, I guess, was it Daniel Day-Lewis? And how he's like method acts. How he like actually doesn't bathe if it's a movie set in like the 1600s or something.
Yeah, when he did the Abraham Lincoln...
Yeah, well, that one I'm thinking of, like, he was in The Crucible, wasn't he? I think he was. That one, we're not here to talk about that one, but like, no. There are still like instances where an actor or actress has rumors about them based on the folklore of the story or the movie that they're making,
Yeah, but I can see people not knowing, because we have the internet now. We can do research, we can look at stuff, we have videos that we can go through on our phones. People back then didn't have none of that. So you come off the theater, you see this guy, you're not familiar with how makeup is applied, or how film production works. I can see that being a real issue.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that would be.
It's kind of like with actors that play Hitler, and then they're known as the guy that played Hitler.
Yeah.
So I can see him being a real-life vampire. He has the look.
He does. But I think, also special effects. I always really enjoy the special effects in old movies like this because it's so pure, I guess.
This had the stop-motion style. That wasn't supposed to look like stop-motion. It was supposed to look like it's actually happening, like when doors would open or when stuff would fly. But to us, it looks like stop motion because that's how they did it. It's the same way.
Yeah, and we also, we're people of modern times. We've seen the different ways that they used to do stuff. But, like, I don't think it doesn't take anything out of the movie, Like, I still enjoyed watching it.
Okay, but we watched this as part of our journey through horror, right? So we started pretty early, the 20s. There's older movies. There's better older movies, in my opinion, but...
This is a good start, I think. It's classic.
I think this is the best way to start, yeah. I think if you want to go through horror, starting with Nosferatu is a really good idea.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's not the oldest horror movie.
No, not by a long shot. Yeah. Not by 30 years.
Yeah. And it's not, like, in my opinion, it's not the best one I've ever seen.
No.
You know?
But it is one of the earliest feature-length horror movies that is very impactful. And it is a pure horror movie. Like, there's no way this could be anything else. This is a horror movie. Even if it's not scary for modern audiences, it's still definitely a horror movie.
Yeah.
And it was a really good start, and I think it's an important stepstone for horror. And what we have now, there's movies made now with millions of dollars that can't be nearly as well shot as this or have as much imagination behind it, because they had to use a lot of that.
Yeah, I agree. And just...
because they didn't have anything to work out of,
yeah.
like we have now. If I want to make a vampire movie, I can say they turn into a bat, which they didn't in this one.
Right.
But I can say that they turn, or they don't like garlic, or because those things have been made to a point I can use them now. But when FW made this, he didn't have anything to go out of besides the books.
Yeah, there wasn't any like built up lore.
Yeah,
or,
so
like, solid built up lore.
Everything that he imagined that was out of the books was out of his head. He couldn't copy from anywhere. So this is completely original. It's the first of its kind, and it's really important to horror, and that's why we picked it.
Yeah. So, what'd you give this out of 10?
I give it a 7. I mean, that's pretty high for a Dracula film. It's pretty low for a horror classic, I guess, but I don't like Dracula. I keep saying that, but I don't. Yeah. The story just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, and I gave it a 6. Mostly because I'm pretty sure I've said on this channel before, or on our podcast before, that I am not a big horror thriller fan.
Well, you got a whole month to go.
I know. But like, they're not my favorite movies. But I always think I'm never bored by them, I guess, unless it's bad, but this was not bad. But
no, this is just the way it's shot is enough to entertain you, because it's super crisp. Mm-hmm. It's really nice to look at, if anything. So, and
I think it's like one of those things that you can definitely like watch over again. Like,
I love watching it over again. Yeah. Even though I don't love the story, I really like watching Nosferatu at any point. And
I feel like with silent films, kind of in general, it's kind of fun to rewatch them because there is no sound, so you can kind of, even though they have those subtitle shots in between, mm-hmm. like the actual imagery, you can kind of pick up new things or create kind of new scenarios within the confines of mm-hmm. of what's being shown and told to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, silent film's a shame it's dead now and no one cares to watch it, because there's a lot of gems out there, even smaller film. The 20s in Germany, there's a lot of movies coming out of there. Yeah. They're really good.
And this was one of them.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it's really good, but it's really important.
Yeah.
And it's very significant for horror and just movies in general.
But yeah, I think that's all for this episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment,